So Erika is an innovation consultant and facilitator. Her career trajectory includes time as an artist, teacher, trainer, and organizational development specialist. And she is now an innovation designer at the moment, an innovation firm in Toronto. She has a passion for how artistic patterns and practice and organizational culture connect to our highest aspirational work and to making things better for the experience of humans everywhere. Her presentation is entitled Designing a Culture, Experiments in Rapid Behavioral Prototyping.
I like to move, so here we are. So yes, my presentation today is called Fostering a Culture of Well-Being, Experiments in Rapid Behavioral Prototyping. I almost called it Adventures in Rapid Behavioral Prototyping, because that sounded cooler and more fun. But I actually think it is this thing that we do, and this thing that I'm going to talk to you about today is an experiment and both an adventure at the same time. I used this particular picture to denote how I think we sometimes look at culture. So, see the guy up there in his cool orange coat, and he is in this big complex system that he can see, and he can see a whole lot of it, and then there's tons that he can't see. It's too big and too complex to wrap his head around, but he can see it and understand it and start to make sense of parts of it. In working in cultures and working cultures and trying to affect them for so long, what has come to me very clearly in the last little while has been that the complexity of culture is often what gets in our way, and it's often the excuse we use to not actually address it well. We say, oh, that's culture, oh, it's hard to shift, oh, let's try to do something simple that will lead us to a better culture. When in fact, in order to shift complex problems or complex systems, we actually have to do many things in order to shift them in a desirable way. They are complex, and yet you can influence them, you can shift them, and part of that is by making things very visible, and part of that is taking a designed approach. So, when we talk about well-being at work, it has already been defined for you in a couple of really awesome ways by the speakers who came before me, so I won't go too much into that. But I will say what's becoming interesting to me is this very big shift from thinking about the workplace as one space and your life as another. So a lot of people used to talk about work-life balance, and we at the moment are now not talking about that because that implies that the two things are separate and that they sort of sit on a seesaw, and one of them is either up or one of them is down, and the other one has to suffer because of it. What I'm starting to see is the difference between, or the boundary between work and the rest of your life, is this, I like to think of it as a membrane that has a zillion perforations. So one seeps into the other, right? They are separate for a number of reasons and structures and ways in which we order our lives, but that perforated membrane is what we should see as the important part of the well-being piece. If we are well at work, that will, the word that keeps coming to my mind is bleed, but it's a positive bleed. So it bleeds into your life, right? And if we are well at home and in the rest of our life, that bleeds into work. And so we also see a perforated membrane between ourselves at work and the people we serve at work. So if we're serving clients or customers or systems or organizations, the more well we are, the more well they will be. Okay, so we've been toying with this and are starting to see some really interesting results in that regard. So when I talk about well-being, it's about that. It's about not only the well-being of people at work, but the well-being of the people that they serve. So why culture? So culture for me, is many things. People have said, what do you think it is? The easiest way to say what culture is, it's how, if you were to if you were to sit at a bar and someone were to say, hey, what is it like to work at the place where you work? All that stuff you say, that's pretty much the culture. That stuff you say when you're getting real about what it's really like to be there. That's pretty much it. Now, it's not that simple, but that's kind of like the flavor of the culture that you have. It's not the values on the wall, although those may be true or not true. It's a number of things. So I have chosen the image of an iceberg. This is a popular way to think about culture, and it's actually very useful, right? So you've got your top of the iceberg, which are your cultural artifacts. These are how people dress. What are the values on the wall? What kind of a building do you do your work in? What kind of furniture do you have? How do you set up work? All that says a lot about the way in which the place works. At the surface are your behaviors. So how do people act within those structures that you've set up and those artifacts that you have? And then deep below the surface, way down deep in the water, are the belief systems that set all of that up. Now, people often try to affect cultures by going at the belief systems, which is really hard. Like, let me tell you, it's just hard to switch how people think by trying to switch how people think or feel. It's also hard to go to the artifacts. You know, we're gonna put in a foosball table and some cool chairs, and that's gonna like make us more designy and creative and all that. Well, sure. Or we might actually intervene at the level of behavior. Okay, so we might actually invite people to work differently, and as they work differently, they're going to create new artifacts and new core belief systems. So the way that I've been working with culture and using a design approach is to go at that sort of surface level, which is the behavior part. So in the blurb about what this talk would be about, I promised 2 stories. So the first story I'm going to tell you is about the Mohawk Valley Health Center. Anyone ever been to Utica, New York? Utica! Oh, you have? Amazing! It's a lovely little place.
On the way to New York City.
It's on the way to New York City, right? You might stop there for dinner. So they have a health system there called the Mohawk Valley Health System. It's comprised of a number of hospitals. There's some great people there, and I've been working for them for about 4 years as a coach in a change program. So the problem, so whenever you're designing, there's a problem, right? You're dealing with a problem that has presented itself. The problem is too many falls, patient falls. Anyone ever had a family member be in the hospital and fall? Few? It's terrible, right? Especially if they're older, especially if they've just had some sort of terrible surgery. It can result in injury and death, and it's something that people need to definitely work on. So their rate was 8 patient days, or the units that were working with us, 8 falls per 1,000 patient days. That sounds not too bad, but it's actually pretty bad. If you actually think of how many people are on the units and how many days they stay, it's terrible. So they needed to lower it. And through this work, they've actually done some great stuff. So the way that hospital changes usually happen, people up in the offices say, this falls rate is too high. Let's tell people to do things differently. Here's the new clinical practice and the new policy. Follow it. And then all the people on the unit go, they don't know how we work around here. This policy may work for surgery, but it totally doesn't work for mental health. So then they struggle, right? And they find workarounds, and it doesn't work. So what we decided to do in this was to take a design approach. So if you're a designer and you've been working in the design world, these terms will not be unfamiliar to you. This idea of discover, do your research, find out who your people are, who are the humans at the center of your work. Diverge, what are all the ideas we could possibly think of that might help develop a solution, deploy, and then the loops happen, right? You go back and forth and use this process. So instead of going top-down policy, we decided to work at the level of the unit and let people design with this in mind. So these are some of the people within the hospital, and they're using a tool called critical uncertainties, which is a liberating structure, which is one of the ways in which we both entered the idea of discovery. So what are you guys all about? What are all the critical uncertainties that face you on a daily basis in your unit? And what are all the ideas for what we might do in order to close some of these gaps and address some of these challenges? So there are about 30 different conversational tools we used on the unit. All had to be used within a 10-minute time frame, because that's all you can get a healthcare worker to sit down or stand up with you for. Right? So when I say rapid behavioral prototyping, this is what I mean. Discover, quickly, diverge, quickly, figure out what you're going to do, ask them to do it for 2 weeks, come back after 2 weeks, say, how'd it go? All right? And this rapid, iterative way of doing things is actually not at all how healthcare workers work. They usually work on problem, solution, problem, solution, because they have to. right? So engaging people to do this, they did a number of things. They lowered their their falls rate from 8 falls per 1,000 patient days to 1. Now that may sound really not that great, but it's amazing. It's amazing, right? And at some points, they had dropped their rate by 40%. It's sort of gone up and down, but the trend has gone in a beautiful line. They've also changed the way in which they feel about each other. So this social change that they've changed the way in which they solve problems together. They have become more playful at work. So they have become, they've decided like, how might we get into new conversations to solve problems that are both fun and enjoyable and get to the clinical practice and everything around the clinical practice. So a benefit to their patients has been immense. Hundreds of people avoiding falls, if you look at the baseline data and then measure it against their change. And also the fact that these people enjoy their work more and feel like more of a team and talk to people they normally don't talk to. Doctors are talking to nurses, nurses are talking to cleaners, cleaners are talking to administrators. Everyone's talking to everyone. Yay. So people have been using techniques like critical uncertainties, TRIZ, improv. Some of the most remarkable changes have been doing comedy improv on the unit with patients and visitors involved in order to explore the incredibly sexy topic of infection prevention. So it's been pretty great. There are a number of principles that go into this work, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. So the second story I want to tell you about today, which talks about using design in order to affect a culture, is the story of my own workplace. So you'll recognize this picture, or this image. Went up for the symposium this year, and this is a new tool that we've designed, but we didn't design it wanting to design a tool. We actually went through a long process of trying to figure out what kind of culture do we want at the moment. So what did we want? We knew that we wanted to create a place that embraced the future of work. We knew that we wanted to create a place that put humans at the center of everything that we do. And that included the humans we serve and also the humans that work in our studio. So how are we going to do that? We had to look at a number of things. We had to take a look at what is our desired culture. So what is the culture we actually want? This could be all the things we say. So I was keeping notes for a really long time about all the things we say about our culture that indicate we want those things, but we might not actually do those things. So, writing those things down, then actually talking to each member of our team and saying, hey, what is the place that you want to build here? What do you value most? Is it security? Is it flexibility? Is it, the ability to work at home? What is it from the grand to the minute? So you can see our original scan was a bit of a wall exercise. Up at the top was all the things we wanted in our desirable culture. And then those little orange pieces of paper were where we were sort of like, and where are we, right? So we took our desirable culture, and then we said, all right, now that we know what we want, let's take those same things and say, are we far away from that desirable culture? Are we getting there? Is this like a high level of alignment or congruence with that desirable culture? And I think this is the key. When we're designing an intentional change of our culture, we need to actually get real about those two things. What is the culture that we want, really? And how will it affect our business and our customers and our clients? And us? And then how are we doing toward that? And getting real about that second piece, about like, are we really achieving this thing? Really? Actually helps us affect it. Because then you can figure out, okay, so we're not doing so well on this one. How might we change that thing? And what might it also be related to in the grand scheme of things? So this was our first go, a super scrappy way of visualizing our culture that seemed to engage people and starting to think about it. The important thing to remember here is, like the Mohawk Valley Health System example, the important game-changing thing for designing our culture was not the artifact, but the conversation around the artifact. And the fact that we got playful and serious and all of those things in order to get real about what was happening. We had hard conversations in developing this. Some of the conversations were like, yeah, we love eating food together. That is super important. And then other times it was like, we don't make decisions well. Let's talk about that. And that's a rabbit hole of horrible. But we sorted it out, so it was really good. Yay! So these are two of my colleagues. And this was, you know, through going through this exercise and developing the culture we want, I see a lot of laughter in our workplace. A lot of joy, a lot of laughter, a lot of camaraderie. One of the key pieces that we wanted out of our culture was to bring the whole person to work, and I've seen that at play many, many times. So I shared this picture just because it denotes the joy that we've had in creating this culture. So, in all of the culture work that I've done, in all of the big culture change projects where we have intentionally tried to shift a culture from one that is less connected to one that is more deeply connected, from one that, you know, focuses on efficiency to one that focuses on people, a number of simple rules have come up, and I'd love to share them with you. So the first is attend to relationships. You must care deeply about how people share information, how they talk, how they connect, how they support one another, how they ask for help. These things are important. So the map you're looking at is actually a social network map. 2 minutes? No way. All right, attend to relationships. Woo. No, do care and map it if you can to try and understand what that is. Second, give it time. Culture change takes time. Don't try to do it in a quarter, because you won't. Likely, when you get to 4 months, you'll start to feel the pain of this is hard. And then 4 months later, you'll be like, this is easier. And then 4 months later, you'll be like, I don't know how we ever did it before. It was like, something's really changed. And then 4 months later than that, it's all really changed and embedded, and now it's hard to shift again. So it's like a good 12 to 18 month project. So work on something meaningful. When you're trying to shift a culture, work on something. You can't act your way into new ways of thinking by just thinking about what the culture is you want. You actually have to apply it to real work in real time. The meaningful piece is work on something that matters to people, and they will engage in new ways for you as they do that. Invite the unusual suspects, make sure everyone is at the table. I can't tell you how many times I've invited a person who cleans a hospital to participate in a patient safety dialogue, and they had the one piece of gold that everybody needed to hear. It happens all the time because no one usually listens to them. It also invites that alternative expertise that we know is so important. Connect people to their data. Make sure they know that the changes that they're making are making a difference, whatever that data is. So for Mohawk Valley, it was this kind of stuff, you know, infection rates, falls rates, pressure ulcer rates, all that. For us at the moment, it was how well we're doing for deadlines, how we're doing on scope, what kind of quality of work that we're putting out. So make sure people know they're making a difference. So this is the map that eventually came out of all of our work to intentionally shift our culture at the moment. And we took a couple of strong stands on that. So on the left-hand side are all the things that you need to be doing in order to create an innovation culture. So that's the behaviors, you'll see working in iterative cycles, seeking alternative expertise, collaboration, embracing change, etc., etc. Then there's the infrastructure, all the supports you need to build in, that if they're not there, innovation won't thrive. And then the activities that you need to be doing in order to make sure that you are actually working while you're trying to change these things, you're working on new things. And then the right-hand side is that perfect flavor of where you work. So what are the values that you really hold? They may not be the values on the wall. What are the things you're working to put forward in the world? What structures are you setting up to support that work? This can be everything from project management to this concept we have up here, which on the green that says no one works alone. So that's a structure that we have that represents a whole lot of stuff. And then the dynamic, bring the whole person to work. Finding an informal and professional vibe, eating together, etc., etc., etc. So this is a way in which we've started to visualize the complexity of culture so that it isn't that crazy tree that we saw at the beginning, but it's something we can actually visualize, compartmentalize, talk, change, track, and use. Thank you very much.